beyond. T-Town Sports has got you covered.
The best of the best.
T-Town Sports Daily is on now.
This is really, really fun.
The home of T-Town Sports Daily is WTPC AM Tuscaloosa, W265CG Tuscaloosa, Sports Radio, Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTPC.
France and the Netherlands both advanced to the knockout stage with wins or draws. And at the College World Series, Tennessee beat Texas A&M for the national title.
Alabama sports and beyond. T-Town Sports has got you covered.
The best of the best.
T-Town Sports Daily is on now.
This is really, really fun.
The home of T-Town Sports Daily is WTPC AM Tuscaloosa, W265CG Tuscaloosa, Sports Radio, Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTPC.
Welcome into T-Town Sports Daily right here on Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTBC, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. I am flying solo today. We had some issues getting some people here this morning, so I'll be rocking and rolling on my own this morning. You heard me on the Martin Houston Show. You heard me on Inside the Locker Room. You heard me on the Gary Harris Show. And now you get to hear me again during T-Town Sports Daily, my show, right here on Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTBC. Got a fun show scheduled for you today. We're going to talk a little bit. I teased this yesterday. Josh Pate mentioned that Alabama's defensive staff has definitely improved from last year to this year. I don't know how much I believe that, but we'll figure that out and we'll talk through that. We'll talk through that and see maybe he's right. Maybe Alabama's defensive staff did improve over last season. And we got some more EA Sports college football news as they ranked the top 10 places to play, the top 10 toughest places to play in college football. I highly disagree with this list. However, they did pay some good respect to Alabama with the Crimson Tide coming as the number 2 toughest place to play in college football. We'll talk about that list and more. And as always, it's the summer, and you know what that means. It's recruiting season here at the University of Alabama. We got some big-time recruiting news. We still got some more stuff coming down the pipeline as the crystal balls come in. We've got multiple stories ready to be written, ready to go out as soon as these players do end up committing, as soon as they do end up flipping to Alabama. We'll have those stories out. We'll be able to talk about it, but we can always preview some of these guys, some of these flips, some of these commitments before they happen. So as always, and we've got some good audio. Ryan Fowler had an interview with a 5-star Mississippi wide receiver, Caleb Cunningham, yesterday on the game from 2 to 6 o'clock. Ryan interviewed Caleb Cunningham, and so we'll have some audio from that as well. Got a good show for you today, and we're ready to get things rocking and rolling right here on T-Town Sports Daily. But as always, I do want to say thank you for allowing me to do what I do, allowing me to discuss college football, talk about college athletics on the air. I couldn't do it without the support from listeners, readers, the whole 9 yards. And so just want to say thank you. And as always, open up the conversation to you guys. Call in at 205-342-9904 and take the conversation wherever you want to go. Or we can talk about some of these topics that I mentioned. The recruiting season, the list from EA Sports ranking the toughest places to play, or the Josh Pate comment that Alabama's defensive staff has definitely improved over last season. So we can discuss many, many different things today right here from 11 to noon. Getting started out of the gate, though. Oh, by the way, really quick, before we get started, I also want to plug the free Tide 100.9 app. You can download it. You can leave us app messages. You can read all the stories, listen to all the shows. I think we're finally getting things rocking and rolling, getting all the shows up on the podcast platforms. I know some of them we're not updating correctly. I think we're kind of working on that, and I think we're getting things situated the way that we should be on that front and on that side of things as well. So a lot of good things going on around here, a lot of exciting things as we are getting ready for Alabama football. We're just 68 days away from the start of the regular season, and I think it's going to be a really good regular season for Alabama. I know a lot of people are giving 8-4, 10-2, whatever. I think it's going to be a fun season. I think it's going to be a really, really good year for Alabama. If nothing more, it's a breath of fresh air. We've had the same system. We've had the same staff, or not the same staff, but we've had the same kind of go around. We knew exactly what to expect every single year, but this is kind of the first year that we don't really know what to expect. Even those years that we were debating, who's the starting quarterback, who's going to win the job, who's not going to win the job, you still knew what to expect. A strong running game, a dominant defense. You were never going to run the score up. Didn't matter if you were playing Vanderbilt. Didn't matter if you were playing LSU. Didn't matter if you were playing Mercer. You were not going to run the score up no matter what on opposing teams. Could we run the score up this year? I don't know. Seems like we're going to be able to. It seems like Alabama's going to be able to score a lot of points this upcoming season. So we'll see we'll see how Alabama looks this upcoming season. I know players are posting their media day pictures right now. You saw the pictures of Caden Proctor kind of revealing that he's going to be wearing that number 74 that he wore last season, which means that true freshman Casey Poe is going to have to change his number because he took Caden Proctor's number 74. So we'll see what Casey Poe is going to end up wearing. We've seen some jersey number switches from other players. I know Kendrick Law is going to end up wearing number 1 for Alabama. I think it's going to be, an interesting change, seeing some of these guys in different jerseys. Emmanuel Henderson's going to be wearing number 3. I think some of the defensive backs have changed too. Not entirely sure on that. I know, like I said, Jaheim Otis switched to number 10. We knew that one was coming down the pipeline. Deontay Lawson is officially got that number 0 on his jersey. So kind of cool, kind of neat to see these little changes here and there from the players. But as we get ready to head into the season, I imagine they're going to do a roster update on the UA football website pretty soon with the new enrollees, the heights and weights of everybody, the new jersey numbers. We know what some of the guys are going to be wearing, but a guy like Noah Carter, who was wearing number 11 in all his commitment pictures and all his recruiting visits, was wearing number 11. Well, guess what? Jihad Campbell's wearing number 11. So obviously Noah Carter is not going to be able to wear number 11 and play on the field at the same time as Jihad Campbell. Would he do that anyways? I don't know. But you can only have a certain number of players with a jersey number. So we'll see what Noah Carter ends up wearing. We think Ryan Williams is going to be wearing number 2. I think that one's pretty safe to say. Ryan Williams is going to be getting number 2. I think Amari Jefferson was a guy that we were talking about could potentially be wearing number 3. Well, now that Emmanuel Henderson's wearing it, what's Amari Jefferson going to wear? What number is he going to have? Rico Scott was a guy that could wear number 1. Well, that number's obviously been taken now by Kendrick Law. So what is Rico Scott going to wear? So we'll see what some of these freshmen wear and what some of these freshmen are able to do heading into fall camp, as we are just 68 days away from the regular season. I imagine we're probably 30-something days away from fall camp as that gets started, and we're just a handful of days away from SEC Media Days down there in Dallas. So we're getting started here on heading full steam ahead towards football season. But I want to get started with this conversation today, talking about the comments Josh Pate made a couple of days ago on Twitter, talking about how Alabama's defensive staff has definitely improved over what they did last season. I think it's an interesting conversation, to say the least. Alabama's been known for their strong defense. Alabama has been known for what they do on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be a stout running defense. They're going to have a great secondary. They're going to have, pretty good pass rushers. I think over the past couple of years, the pass rushing looked better because of the way the game was moving. And so if offenses are moving faster and defenses have to get a little bit faster in order to keep up, well, then obviously the defense is going to have to get faster and get stronger as well to keep up with the changes around the offensive side of the football. So pass rushers may have looked faster the past couple of years, with Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, but does that necessarily mean they were better? I don't know. I think a guy like Tim Williams is probably the best edge rusher we've seen come through Tuscaloosa in a very, very long time. I think Will Anderson is probably a better ball player, But in terms of being like a pure edge rusher with talent and bend and speed and hand quickness, whatever, I'd probably give it to Tim Williams. I know that's somebody that Christian Miller here has talked about a lot as well on the Miller's Edge from 12 to 2 o'clock. But Josh Pate mentioned that Alabama's defensive staff has definitely improved. And so I wanted to go by position and see kind of why is he saying something like that? Clearly he's seen something that is tipping him off that, yeah, this staff is much, much better. And it may just be that, hey, he saw something behind the scenes that we didn't last year, or that other media and fans didn't see last year, and so that's why he's saying it. Or maybe he's seeing something and he's really bought into what Alabama's going to be doing this upcoming season. I don't know. But I do think it is kind of interesting that a guy who's got a platform like that, who knows what he says is going to be taken out of context, is going to be blown up, still says something like that. And I know, it's not his responsibility for what other people say or do when he says something, but still, you think about it, and it's something you consciously pay attention to when you have a platform like this. There's certain things, Christian Miller's talked to me before, and he's talked about, I got to be careful because people take it and run. People take what we say and they run with it. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit tough out there. So, Josh Pate's he's a veteran. He knows what he's doing when it comes to this stuff. Is he just building hype for Alabama so that way, when Alabama exceeds expectations or doesn't meet expectations, we can pound the table and say, yep, that's right, Alabama, is good enough, or Alabama isn't good enough? Not entirely sure. But he said they definitely improved. And so going position by position group, you've got Freddie Roach. First off, I think you get better with experience no matter what. It doesn't matter if you've some 1 year of experience or 20 years of experience. That next year of experience, I think you're a better coach. I think you're a better staff member because you learn some new things. You learn some things that, maybe you didn't know, or you perfected a skill that maybe wasn't quite up to the standard right out the gate whenever you were coaching the previous year. So I think Freddie Roach is a better coach and a better recruiter than he was last year. So point to 2024 Alabama versus 2023 Alabama defensive staff. Okay, sure. And that's a little bit finicky. If you want to say Freddie Roach is a scratch, okay, I understand that. He's the same coach. He's the same guy. It's, what Freddie Roach, who Freddie Roach is. He's a good coach. He's a great recruiter. I think, if you want to say that's a scratch, I'll listen to that. That's a scratch. So you're either sitting at 1-0 for 2024 Bama, or you're sitting at nothing still. Okay, cool. That's fine. You had Coleman Hutzler, who was the outside linebacker coach and special teams coach last season for Alabama. And this year you've got Charles Robinson, who I believe his name is, now I'm questioning myself. Give me 1 second. His name is not Charles. Christian Robinson. I am so sorry. His name just absolutely blanked in my mind there. I'm very sorry about that. You've got Christian Robinson, the outside linebacker coach here in Tuscaloosa, who has experience at places like Georgia, Florida. He's got SEC experience. He's got SEC ties that a lot of people said this Alabama staff didn't have. So Christian Robinson's got some SEC ties there. I think he's a good recruiter. I think he's a great I think he's a good recruiter. I think he's a good coach. I think Hutzler's resume was probably bolstered a little bit by having guys such as, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Chris Braswell. Obviously, they came in a little bit more. They came in a little bit more polished, a little bit more ready than I would say guys like Quandarius Robinson and guys like Keanu Coate came in. But I think that Christian Robinson is a guy that could potentially come out and turn these guys into really good ball players. I haven't seen it yet, and it's tough to grade a staff when you don't have game experience. Like we don't know what he's doing with Q-Rob and Keanu Coate and the Bandit position, which I guess Bandit's actually coached a little bit more by Freddie Roach, but still, we don't know what he's doing with these guys because we haven't seen them play. Sure, we've got A-Day, but are we going to compare one game of A-Day versus a couple of seasons worth of experience from Hutzler? If you're doing that, you may need to stop grading people if you're going to be the one to grade one game versus a couple of seasons of experience. So, I think the jury's still out. Probably going to give it to Hutzler though, just because you've got potential, just because he had more production right out of the gate, and we've seen what Hutzler can do. But again, it's very, very tough to grade this upcoming staff, considering the fact that they don't have any game experience at Alabama. We haven't seen what Kane Womack was going to do with Deontay Lawson and Jihad Campbell. We have not seen what we haven't seen what Robinson is going to do with Q-Rob and Keanu Code and the edge and Quay Russaw. We haven't seen what Mo Linguist is going to do with Damani Jackson and the defensive backs. We haven't seen what Colin Hitchler is going to do with Keon Sabb and the safeties. But we saw what the staff did last year. We saw what the defense looked like last year. It was a top 20 unit. And as Christian Miller said yesterday on the Miller's Edge, you take out that LSU game, they're probably a top 10 unit, because that LSU game really had Alabama on their heels. You take away that game, and I know you can't just say, oh, well, if you remove the loss to Michigan, Alabama had one loss last year. I get that. But, there's anomalies. There's certain things that kind of skew. There's things that skew stats throughout the season. If Alabama's giving up 50 rushing yards a game, well, that's a pretty damn good run defense. But then there's one game, a single one ball game that they give up 200 rushing yards. Well, all of a sudden your average yards per game is going to go from 50 to, it's going to inflate that stat and make you look a little bit worse over the course of the season than you actually were, versus, having a stout defense the entire year, and then you have one down game where you give up just a crap ton of yards. So take away that LSU game, and Alabama's probably got a top 10 defensive unit in college football. LSU had the number one offense in every major statistical category in college football. I think, Malik Neighbors led the country in, I believe, or he was close to the lead in the country in receiving yards, Brian Thomas Jr. was close to the lead in touchdowns. Jaden Daniels led in every major category for a quarterback, just about, won the Heisman Trophy. They had a top-tier offensive line last year. They're going to have a top-tier offensive line again this year. I think, but you take out that LSU game, Alabama's got a top 10 defense. So it's very, very tough to kind of grade it in that same scale, but we're going to do it anyways, just because somebody who's a very prominent voice in college football media said something along those lines. So we'll say Freddie Roach is better than he was last year. So that's 1-0 2024. We're going to give the edge to Hutzler for the outside linebacking room and the edge rushers. So we're tied right now from the front two guys. We're tied right now on this Alabama defensive staff with Freddie Roach and Coleman Hutzler and then Christian Robinson. Then you want to take that next step back and you want to look at the inside backers. I think Kane Womack is probably better suited to be the position coach for the linebacking room. As a defensive coordinator, I think it's Kevin Steele. So if you're looking at defensive coordinator for Alabama, Kevin Steele is a dog. He had so much experience. That was his third stint at Alabama alone, not to mention having stops at, Auburn. And you remember those Auburn defenses back in 2016, 2017, 2018, when Kevin Steele was the defensive coordinator at Auburn? They were some of the more feared units in college football. Hell, that 2019 Auburn defense held LSU to one of their lowest scoring totals of the season. That 2019 LSU team that, was this lightning in a bottle best team of all time, well, damn near lost at home to Auburn and, a freshman Bo Nix because of how good that Auburn defense was. So Kevin Steele was a really, really strong defensive coordinator. He's got a ton of experience, and I think Kevin Steele is almost head and shoulders above where Kane Womack is right now as a defensive coordinator. So if you're looking at the defensive coordinator position, I would probably give Kevin Steele that tick. So you're sitting at 2-1, the 2 being for the 2023 team. And I know the idea that Kevin Steele was not calling plays by the end of the season. Corey and Christian Miller talked about it yesterday. It was T-Rob by the end after week 2, basically. It was T-Rob being the defensive coordinator. Okay, sure, but you still had the wealth of knowledge that Kevin Steele brought. You still had just this immense experience that Kevin Steele brought brought to the table. And even if he's not the guy calling plays on Saturdays, guess what? In the meeting rooms on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in the film room on Thursday, Kevin Steele is the guy that they were still leaning on him for his knowledge of a defense and his ability to understand what an offense is trying to do. So they were still leaning on Kevin Steele pretty heavily during the week. It just so happens that, T-Rob was the one calling the plays and the one designing everything on Saturday. So still going to give that notch to T-Rob over Kane Womack. Now, when you look at position coaching in general, Robert Bala versus Kane Womack, I'm going to give that nod to Kane Womack. He's got more experience than Bala had. Bala's a nice up-and-comer in the coaching world, but Deontay Lawson had his best game of the season to start the year and then consistently got worse throughout the season until he sat some time out due to the injury, and then he came back and he was a good ball player again. But his best game of the year was week 1, and I know it was Middle Tennessee State, but it was still week 1 was his best game of the season. Didn't quite improve the way a lot of people thought he would over the course of the season. So I think, Robert Bala, and then, of course, you had Jihad Campbell and Tresman Marshall, who both were kind of in and out of the lineup due to some injuries. There were times that Jihad Campbell maybe didn't quite understand what was going on, didn't know the play that was happening, and so that's why I think you saw Tresman get a lot more run than some fans maybe wanted last season. Well, it's Tresman Marshall's gone now. He's I believe he's trying to make an NFL roster currently. It's Jihad Campbell and Deontay Lawson, 1A, 1B right now here in Tuscaloosa, here at the University of Alabama. I think Kane Womack is doing a good job coaching them up. Again, it's kind of tough to grade considering the fact that Kane Womack has not coached a game yet at Alabama, but I think I'm going to give that notch to Kane Womack because he's got head coaching experience. He's got other defensive coordinating experience. He's got experience coaching inside linebackers more than Robert Bala did at the time. So I think, I probably am giving that notch to Kane Womack. So we're tied right now at 2-2. And then we're tied 2-2 between the 2023 and the 2024 coaching staffs. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about this, and we're going to break down the secondary. I think the secondary is really where you see the difference in this Alabama coaching staff from last year versus the Alabama coaching staff for this year. We're also going to talk about the ratings that EA Sports put out in the toughest places to play in college football. And Ryan Fowler had that really great interview with Caleb Cunningham discussing the University of Alabama, discussing his visit with the university, and is he ready to commit? We'll talk about that and more on the other side of this break on T-Town Sports Daily right here on Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTBC, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. We'll be right back.
Field, go to skilltradesofwestalabama.com and find out more information about the 4-week Jumpstart program and take your first steps towards a rewarding career.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A very hot afternoon. The sky sunny, the high near 100. For tonight, fair with the low at 74. And for tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds. We'll have the chance of scattered showers and thunderstorms by afternoon. The high tomorrow, 98. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 94 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Welcome back to T-Town Sports Daily on Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTBC, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. We are currently in the process of grading the Alabama staff as Josh Pate, a prominent voice in the world of college football, has mentioned that this Alabama staff has definitely been an improvement over the old Alabama staff from 2023. We're currently sitting at a 2-2 tie. We gave Freddie Roach and Kane Womack the nod over Freddie Roach last year and Robert Bala as position coaches, but we gave Coleman Hutzler and Kevin Steele the nod over Kane Womack and Christian Robinson as the defensive coordinator and the outside linebacker coach, respectively, from last year's defense. We're heading into the secondary now, and I think the secondary is where you really, really see the difference here in last year's staff and this year's staff. Last year's staff, you had Travaris Robinson, Coach T-Rob, as the secondary coach. He coached both corners and safeties, and then, of course, you had, we'll wait to get to that point. You had Coach T-Rob as the secondaries coach. He was coaching Kool-Aid, Terrion, Trey Amos, Caleb Downs, Malachi Moore, and Jalen Key. Those were your starting, your top guys on this Alabama defense last year. More than likely, the top guys on the Alabama defense this year: Damani Jackson, Xavier Brown, Malachi Moore, Keon Sabb. I know Devontae Smith is getting some run in there as well. So, a much, much different defense with only one returning starter from last year's squad. However, you do have two defensive back coaches now here at the University of Alabama this season. You've got Mo Linguist, who is kind of working more with the corners. I know he's got a co-DB coach title basically attached to his name. Same with Colin Hitchler, who also has, like I said, also has the co-DB coach title to his name. But I think more so what it is Mo Linguist is working with the corners. Colin Hitchler is working with the safeties. That's what Hitchler worked with at Cincinnati. It's what he worked with at Wisconsin. Mo Linguist is more specialized in corners. It's what he worked with in the league when he was with the Dallas Cowboys for that one season. So I think that's how the breakdown is. From all things, from what I've heard, from what I've seen, from people I've talked to, Mo Linguist is kind of hitting it out of the park when it comes to recruiting. He's great. He's a great relationship builder. He explains everything very, very well to the players, to the coaches, and relationships are so big right now in recruiting. In that you tell these kids, hey, don't go for a coach, go for the program. Pick the program that you think is best for you. Well, what program is best for you? Do you think all these defensive backs would have came to Alabama had they not been able to be coached by Nick Saban, who is the greatest football coach of all time and also played defensive back? Probably not. There probably would have been a lot of guys that Alabama did not land because Nick Saban was not in that room. So having a guy who has been at the highest level, Mo Linguist has coached at the highest level in the NFL, and he's got that experience. He's got the relationship building aspect down to a T from what I've heard. This dude is, relationship-wise, that seems to be the emphasis Kalen DeBoer is putting on. This staff is hitting it out of the park, it seems. Kane Womack is great with it. Mo Linguist is phenomenal with it. Courtney Morgan is phenomenal with it. The offensive side of the staff is great with it. So recruiting-wise, I'd probably give it to Mo Linguist right now over Coach T-Rob. And I know Mo Linguist doesn't have a ton of recruits to his name yet, but you wait till Friday, Mo Linguist will have a couple more underneath his belt when it comes to getting these recruiting wins. And then additionally, you kind of could argue that Mo Linguist does have some of these recruiting wins because guys like Keon Sabb didn't come in. Keon Sabb was a transfer from Michigan. Damani Jackson had the ability to transfer out. All this entire Alabama defense had the opportunity to transfer out, yet they were able to build the relationship with this coaching staff incredibly quickly and decided not to transfer out. They had to re-recruit all 85 scholarships on this roster. Some of them they did, some of them they didn't. But do you count those as recruiting wins? Because I kind of tend to count those as recruiting wins, considering the fact that some of these guys had multiple offers to go other places. Jalen Morrow even mentioned it. There was a little bit of tampering going on with people reaching out to him. So I can imagine there more than likely were people doing the same thing with the other players on the Alabama football roster, not just Jalen Milroe. So they all had offers. They all had opportunities to find a new home, and yet this current staff was able to recruit them, was able to get everybody to stay on the roster that stayed on the roster. So I kind of also am counting that as a bit of a recruiting win for Mo Linguist as well. So recruiting-wise, I probably would give it to Mo Linguist over T-Rob. Coaching-wise, I probably am giving cornerbacks to T-Rob. He, Kool-Aid was a lockdown corner, shutdown cornerback. He was knocked by the NFL for not being thrown out enough. That's how locked down Kool-Aid McKinstry was. And then Terry and Arnold, he took some of the biggest leaps in development I've seen a player make in college football, and he he was rewarded by it by becoming a first-round draft pick, the final first-round draft pick of the Nick Saban era in Tuscaloosa. Fitting that it was Terrion Arnold that was the final first-round draft pick, a defensive back, a guy that seemed to have a great relationship with Coach Saban, a guy that took coaching so well, always worked on his craft, had the opportunity to go somewhere else, but trusted the process and became a superstar and a household name here in Tuscaloosa. So very fitting that Terrion Arnold was the final first-round draft pick of the Nick Saban area. And I say the final first-round draft pick, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Booker, whoever's drafted in the first round next year Nick Saban's also going to get credit for them a little bit, but I mean, the entire full Nick Saban process. Tyler Booker's going to get a lot of credit to Nick Saban as well, but the full process from high school recruiting to the NFL, Terrion was the last first-round draft pick of Nick Saban's era here in Tuscaloosa. So very fitting that it was Terrion. But probably going to give cornerbacks the notch to T-Rob. So that's check. If you want to count recruiting technically, then we're sitting at 3-3, but I think it all comes into one. And so I think I'm going to give that notch to T-Rob over Mo Linguist just because, again, haven't seen it yet from Mo Linguist. Haven't seen what the corners look like under his coaching here in Tuscaloosa. So T-Rob is currently got last year's staff at a 3-2 advantage over this current staff. When it comes to the safeties, I might give that to Colin Hitchler. I haven't seen a ton out of him yet, but we know there were times that Caleb Downs made a lot of freshman mistakes last year. It just happens. He's a freshman. He's going to be uber talented anyways. But there were points last season where it seemed like certain guys were almost unplayable. I'm not here to trash anybody, but Mr. Irrelevant in this year's draft, Jalen Key, there were times where he was just not in the right position, not making the right decision, and is part of that because of the coaching? It's got to be. I mean, if he's being taught to do the wrong thing, well, when he does the wrong thing in a game, you kind of have to equate that to the coaching. You kind of have to say, okay, well, it's because the coaching, he coached him to do it wrong. And so I think having a separate safeties coach from the cornerback coach is a good move for Alabama. I think that's the right move. I don't think unless you're, the elitist of the elite, you can coach both at the same time just because both do things so differently depending on the scheme. If you're in a man coverage scheme most of the time, well, a lot of the times you've got two high safeties, so they're playing zone cover, they're playing deep zone, and the rest of your defensive backs are playing man coverage. You're teaching them to do two extremely, extremely different things at that point. And so I think Colin Hitchler gets the nod of the safeties over Coach T-Rob and the cornerbacks. And so you look up here, and we're sitting at a 3-3 tie. We're heading to Game 7 right here. And Game 7 is always going to be won when you take into account the fact that Nick Saban was also coaching this defense. So I think this staff is probably, the assistant-wise, this staff is probably right at the same level as last year's coaching staff. If you want to give Freddie Roach a point for getting better as the years go by, sure, okay, but they're sitting in a pretty similar spot. And then you take into account the fact that Nick Saban was also coaching this defense. It was said that last year Nick Saban had to coach this defense at much more intense, at a much higher level than he's had to coach defenses in the past. I think you got to give it to last year's coaching staff and talking about the fact that Nick Saban was so heavily involved again in the defensive back room. So 2023, in my opinion, the 2023 staff was better than the 2024 staff solely because Nick Saban was on the roster. Nick Saban's the coup de grace. If you're sitting at a dead even slate, Nick Saban makes it just that much better. Hell, even if you're sitting at this year's staff is better by a considerable margin. The fact that Nick Saban was on last year's staff still probably makes them a little bit better than what this year's staff is. So I'm giving the nod to 2023 defensively. 2024 assistant-wise probably gets it, but Nick Saban gives them the win for 2023. Offensively, I think it's without a question, no doubt in my mind, this year's offensive staff is much, much better than last year's offensive staff. You got Robert Gillespie, who I give him the point for 2024 just because he gets better with age. Coaches typically get better the longer they coach. So Robert Gillespie, 2024 over Robert Gillespie, 2023. Jamarcus Shepard, 3 wide receivers in the top 100 of this NFL draft, is hitting it out of the park with recruiting. Alabama was dead in the water with a lot of these kids that they're now allegedly leading for on the recruiting trail. You've got guys like Ryan Williams, Caleb Odom, Jeremy Bernard that are going to be making big-time plays for this team this upcoming season. Jamarcus Shepard over Holman Wiggins almost all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. You've got Chris Kapilovic, who is coaching the offensive line over Eric Wolford from last season. Wolford's scheme just didn't seem to fit what works in college football. He wanted the offensive linemen so big that, sure, they're maulers in the run game. Absolutely. Alabama, no doubt, was strong in the run game last season. However, in the pass game, they really, really struggled. And so I think from what I've heard, I think Chris Kapilovic is going to be a better offensive line coach. They're still keeping that nastiness, that mauler mentality in the run game versus last season, but then they're also going to be better in the pass blocking scheme. And I think you've got one of the better offensive lines in college football with Parker Brailsford, the best center in the country. You've got two guards, that probably could both go to the NFL, probably are both going to the NFL after this season. You've got Caden Proctor, who will get better with a year of experience. He's trimmed down a good bit, so I think he's going to be faster than what he was last season. He's going to have a faster kickback in pass blocking. And then right tackle, your right tackle is going to be a net negative just because of how good J.C. Latham was. You don't replace a top 10 draft pick in the NFL and immediately get better the next season. It's just not the case. So probably right tackle is a grade down, sure, but the other 4 positions are a grade up from last year, with your 2 guards getting another year of starting experience, your left tackle getting another year of starting experience. And as long as Parker Brailsford can put that ball, he doesn't even have to block well. If he can just snap it well, it's already an upgrade over what I believe what Seth McLaughlin was last season. So offensive line, net positive. Chris Kapilovic over Eric Wolford. Robert Gillespie over Robert Gillespie last year. Jamarcus Shepard over Holman Wiggins last year. We're sitting at a 3-0 lead. We're getting ready for the full sweep here. And then you bring in the fact that you've got the offensive coordinator in Nick Sheridan, who I think is going to be much, much better than what Tommy Rees was last year. Tommy Rees at times just didn't seem like he wanted Jalen Milroe out there at times. There were times where, Alabama's offensive line is getting killed, and Tommy Rees is not leaving a running back in to help chip or to help pass block, or he's not leaving a tight end, on a block and go or something like that. Just something that, can help out the offensive line. It felt like at times Tommy Rees just blatantly was not doing that at points last season. Not that he didn't want to. It's just not that he, didn't know how to do that. He just blatantly was not doing it last season. So I think Nick Sheridan's going to be a much better offensive coordinator and a much better QB coach than what Tommy Rees was last year. And then I think you bring in the fact that you've got Kalen DeBoer as the offensive minded, as the guru, it seems, in those offensive meeting rooms. He's probably a top 3 mind in college football right now when it comes to the offensive side of things. You could probably argue that he's number 2 over Lane Kiffin, but I think Sark is number 1. Kalen DeBoer is right there when it comes to offensive mind and offensive talent. And so I think you're sitting at 4-0, 5-0 if you count Kalen DeBoer versus last year's offensive staff. So I've got no doubt that this year's offense is going to be better, but last year's defensive staff was better with the fact that they had Nick Saban. Now, again, take away Nick Saban, defense probably is the same, offense is going to get better. And, if that's the case, what killed Alabama in that game against Michigan? The offensive line pass blocking and the fact that the offense could not, stay in rhythm and get going. So if the defense is the same and the offense now can stay in rhythm and get going and develop a little bit quicker, well, you're sitting in a pretty daggum good spot. I think you'll be sitting in a pretty daggum good spot come late November, early December, as we're getting ready to figure out who's going to be making the college football playoffs. So could Alabama be better this season than they were last season? Potentially. It just depends on how you on how you grade, how far is the defense going to drop off versus how far is the offense going to step up. So it all just depends. We'll see what it looks like in 68 days. We're going to take a break. When we come back, the grading or the rankings of the top 10 toughest places to play in college football. EA Sports put it out because they're putting out rankings for the new EA Sports college football. Excuse me, I can't speak, which is really bad considering I am flying solo. The EA Sports College Football 25 video game. They put out their rankings for the top 10 toughest places to play in college football. And I really do not agree with that ranking. But we'll talk about that and more on the other side of this break right here on T-Town Sports Daily on Tide 100.9 and 1230 AM WTBC, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
For 15% off your first purchase. Love it or return it for free. That's LUME deodorant.com, code 3333 to save 15% today.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide football.
Alabama touchdown.
Only on Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
EA Sports College Football 25 is set to come out in just a couple of days, actually. I say a couple of days. Less than 3 weeks as we are getting underway. That game is set to come out on July 19th. That is a Friday. If you get the pre-order, you can play it on July 16th, and you best believe I done got that pre-order because I need to play that game. It's been years since we've had college football video game and college football video game, and I am ecstatic for this game to come out next month. Today, EA Sports put out the top 10 toughest places to play in the game. It's basically a reflection of the top 10 toughest places to play in college football. So from number 10 to number 1, you've got Florida, Florida State, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Penn State. Those are your bottom 5. Your top 5 are Georgia, Ohio State, LSU at number 3, Bryant-Denny Stadium in Alabama ranking number 2. Texas A&M and Kyle Field is ranked as the toughest place to play in college football. This list is an absolute joke. This is a laughing stock. The toughest places to play in college football. Have they not watched an Auburn game? Have they not watched what LSU looks like at home? I mean, Kyle Field, A&M has lost 18 games in Kyle Field since 2014. First off, Alabama's lost 9 games under Nick Saban at home in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So you have an even bigger sample size. You have an even tougher set of opponents because the SEC West they've all been in the SEC West before A&M got there. Alabama was playing LSU every year before they were playing A&M every year. They were playing teams like Arkansas in the early 2000s. They were playing Georgia a couple of times in that stadium. They host Florida. They host Tennessee every other year. They host Auburn every other year. Yet Bryant-Denny Stadium has seen Alabama lose just 9 football games in the Nick Saban tenure in Tuscaloosa. I'm not arguing that Alabama should be number 1. I'm arguing Texas A&M should not be number 1. I think you're sitting at the toughest places to play. You're talking about Death Valley, LSU's Death Valley. It utterly shocks me that LSU is not number 1 on this list. You're talking about Jordan-Hare in Auburn. I know, we're a Tide 100.9 station. We're technically an Alabama station, but we do talk about sports. We do talk about, other things outside of Alabama, and we don't always have to say overly positive things about Alabama. I know a lot of us do, but we don't have to. We can, it's okay. We can accept criticism here on this station of the University of Alabama. It's not the end of the world if we're not pounding our chest every single day and saying Alabama's the greatest, the greatest thing since sliced bread. Number 1, they are because of the product that they've put on the field. But it's okay if we do sit back and say, you know what? I don't know about that. I don't know if I necessarily trust that, they've got the best team this year. I'm not saying they're going 8-4, but I'm not saying they're going 12-0. So Alabama probably should not be number 1 on this list. You could probably argue to me that Alabama's not in the top 5 on this list, and that's a conversation I'd be willing to have. I think Kyle Field is a tougher place to play environment-wise than Bryant-Denny Stadium. So already Alabama, again, sitting at number 2. I think Death Valley is a tougher place to play than Bryant-Denny Stadium, so that's putting Alabama at 3. Have you not watched a night game in Jordan-Hare, EA Sports? Have you not watched the Iron Bowl, EA Sports? I know Auburn gets up for that game much, much more than they get up for any other game, but by God, that is one of the toughest environments to play in college football. Jordan-Hare should absolutely be in the top 10. Beaver Stadium, I like them being in the top 10. Probably would rank them ahead of Alabama. So we're looking at Death Valley, Kyle Field, Beaver Stadium, and and Jordan Hare. So boom, already Alabama sitting at number 5. You could I'd listen to the argument that Doak Campbell is a tougher place to play because you've got the war chant that Florida State does. And that war chant, that place gets crazy. That place gets insane when you've got that war chant going. So I'd listen to the conversation on Florida State. I'd listen to the conversation on Neyland Stadium as well. Tennessee is an absolutely crazy place to play. Players get scared going into Neyland Stadium. It's just that nuts. If you're talking about loudness, I'd probably say Mississippi State is over Alabama. Granted, they've got the artificial noisemaker and the cowbell, but if you're talking about it being loud, Mississippi State's probably up there as well. You talk about, from my personal experience, between all the stadiums I've been in, and I've been in a good bit of SEC stadiums, watching games, Arkansas is up there. Calling the Pigs is really weird, or calling the Hogs, is really strange, but it gets them going, and that place is built to let the crowd noise echo off. So when the crowd in the bowl is making noise, it bounces up and then it bounces off the top of the stadium and goes right back down on the field. And then, of course, when the crowd in the upper deck is making noise, they're just shooting it straight into the field as well. So, Arkansas is another really, really strong environment, really, really tough place to play in college football. So, are they top 10? I don't know, but there's still some incredibly, incredibly tough places that Alabama has played at. There's some incredibly, incredibly tough places in all of college football. I think, you look at a place like Memorial Stadium at Clemson. That's another tough environment. I've been to Williams-Brice. That's a fun stadium to play at. Lane Stadium for Virginia Tech. I know they get rocking pretty loud as well. DKR in Texas is another really tough environment. So, in terms of the top 5, I think it's absolutely ridiculous that you've got Kyle Field at 1. But I will say Bryant-Denny Stadium probably should be in the top. I mean, it's a top 10 toughest environment in college football. I think it's more than likely closer to 5 than it is to 1. I'd probably put Bryant-Denny at number 5. My list probably would be Death Valley at number 1, Beaver Stadium number 2, Kyle Field number 3, and then probably I'd say, you know what? I'm going to say Neyland Stadium number 4, Bryant-Denny Stadium number 5, Jordan Hare number 6, Samford number 7, and yeah, that's my top 10 toughest or top 7 toughest places to play in college football. They are loud environments. I think they also are taking into multiple things. I think they're also taking multiple things into account with these lists. They're looking at, team prestige, home records over the past couple of years, decibel records, I believe, as these stadiums do get incredibly loud, do get incredibly rocking. And so I think that's potentially something that they're looking at as well. But even still, that's why they've got Alabama ranked so high. You've got team prestige. Nobody in the country is more prestigious than Alabama is right now, even with the transition from Nick Saban. You talk about winning record. Alabama's lost 9 games in the last 17 years at home. There's your winning record right there. Stadium attendance. I know we talked about it before that stadium attendance did kind of dip for a little bit there. But after Nick Saban started really putting an emphasis on, fans staying for the full 4 quarters, guess what? Fans started staying for the full 4 quarters. And so fan attendance is still up there. One of the top in the country. It's one of the biggest college stadiums in the country. So I think, that's why they put Bryant-Denny at the top. But if you talk to people who have been to these environments, if you talk to people who have been to a bunch of different stadiums in college football, Bryant-Denny's probably not in their top 5 when it comes to biggest environments in college football. So I don't entirely think I don't love the list. The list is a little goofy, but it's the off season. This is when we start to have these conversations, and so I'll tell you who seems to really enjoy Bryant-Denny Stadium though. Is these recruits. These recruits seem to have a really, really good time visiting Tuscaloosa, visiting Bryant-Denny Stadium. And actually, Alabama just picked up a couple of crystal balls to land a few 5-star prospects, including 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham from Mississippi. He interviewed with Ryan Fowler yesterday to talk about his visit, talk about Coach DeBoer, talk about Tuscaloosa and what he liked. And so here's what a 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham had to say about his visit to Tuscaloosa over the weekend.
Let's go to that 5-star wide receiver. I'm going to take you to Choctaw County, and he's in a bad area. Let's see if we can get him. Hey, Caleb, welcome to Tuscaloosa. Hope you're having a great day.
Oh yeah, yes sir. I'm doing pretty good.
Good. Well, listen, we don't have but a few minutes, but let me visit with you for a couple of minutes. And if you're driving and if your signal fades out, I know you told me earlier that you may be in some limited times or limited areas there, but you having a good afternoon?
Oh, most definitely. Just headed to my girlfriend's house right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, you just got through with your visit here at the University of Alabama. Give me your reaction to what happened here in T-Town.
Oh, man. It was, I learned about it was a great visit. One of the visits I went on, I had a great time, like, spending time with Coach Shep, Coach DeBoer, and the rest of the staff. It was just a great visit.
What was it about that visit that stood out?
Really everything, and really them like giving me all like the details and things like that. Like it's the reason them and why not detail about them? Elman is Belman, and then like they got everything that you need to.
And Caleb Cunningham visiting with us here, 5-star wide receiver from Ackerman, Mississippi, Choctaw County. He's a Charger and a big high school over there that produces a lot of talent. So Caleb, what was it to be able to get to know Coach Shep, man? Because his energy is just off the charts. What was it like to be around Jamarcus Shepard?
Oh man, it's great. If I'm not around, like I hear him somewhere, because like every time he talks, he's loud.
Sure.
Then he's a great coach. He has a lot of great energy about me. We was talking today and stuff like that. Had a good conversation, and it was just great. Spending time when he's a great coach. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country, college football. So it was pretty good spending time with him. He's a great guy.
Could you see yourself playing for him?
Most definitely. No doubt about it.
All right. So let me ask you from a wide receiver perspective. None of us, I say a lot of us, will never have a chance to have the stars and the recognition for one to be able to take a 5-star wide receiver. But tell me from a wide receiver's perspective how this offensive system is so attractive for people like yourself.
Well, Bama, like, they always gonna get their receivers, like the playmakers, like they want to get the ball and mainly be the receivers, because the receivers at Bama, they gonna go crazy. Like they always like seeing people to the league. I think they got the most. They done sent the most people to the league, and then like I know they done sent a good bit of receivers, and I think I could be one of them too. So if you pick Bama, like Bama's the place to be, like for a receiver. If you like a great receiver, I ain't saying I'm a great, like I'm okay, but a person like me, I love to play at Bama for what they do.
So Caleb, what would the decision come down to? When will you make this decision?
I'm not sure yet, but it would definitely be before this December.
Okay, so you're a guy that would like to be a commitment. What do you think? I mean, would you like to get through with your high school season?
I don't know at this point, to be
okay.
real.
Okay, no problem. I'm just
That was Caleb Cunningham. A little bit of the audio from his interview with Ryan Fowler. You can go listen to that on Tide 100.9, the full game with Ryan Fowler from 2 to 6 o'clock, or you can listen on all podcast platforms, the interview Caleb had with Ryan. Really quick, we're going to head out to the phone lines here and talk with Alf. Alf, how you doing today? Hey, Alf, you there? Hey, Alf, are you with me still? Going once, going twice, and it does not appear that he's still on the line. So, unfortunately, sorry for that, Alf. We're just going to have to call back tomorrow, and we will get you back on the airwaves. I do apologize for that as well. We are going to get out of here and make way now for Corey Miller and Chris Miller and the Miller's Edge. I will be producing that show as well. So if you do show If you do enjoy my show, you'll get to hear more of my wonderful voice on the Miller's Edge. And if not, I'll be quiet and let you listen to Corey Miller and Christian Miller talk, because I know they're both going to have a lot of good things to say today about Alabama recruiting, probably about this list as well. And they always seem to have some fun when they go at it when talking the Alabama Crimson Tide. So thank you guys so much for listening to T-Town Sports Daily. Like I said, Corey and Christian Miller are coming up with the Miller's Edge from 12 to 2 o'clock. And then Ryan Fowler will take you home with the game from 2 to 6 p.m. today. You can catch all of our shows on the Tide 100.9 app and Tide100.9.com. And thank you guys for listening, and stay tuned for more great radio all day long.